In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
There was a brewing controversy. You may or may not actually be aware of it. But the United States was cheated. The United States skaters were cheated in the Olympics. Now, the U.S. Olympic Committee, the International Olympic Committee, they're all getting together and it's being made right. Members of the U.S. Olympic figure skating team learned late yesterday that they will get gold medals now. Russian skater Kamila Valieva has been disqualified for doping at the 2022 Winter Games in Beijing.
What?
Yes. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee got word that the IOC would award the gold to the U.S. for the team competition, which is thrown into turmoil after Valieva's positive test from 6 weeks before the competition was revealed. From 6 weeks before the competition,
And this is 2 years later, we're finding out that they're, come on.
There was an email sent from the IOC to the USOPC, these are the Olympic committees and official bodies, right? Saying that, quote, they are now in a position to award the medals in accordance with the ranking, which has to be established by the International Skating Union. The USOPC confirming that CEO Sarah Hirshland had received the news that Americans were declared the winners. The IOC said, the International Olympic Committee, that it, quote, had great sympathy with the athletes who have had to wait for 2 years to get the final results of their competition. The IOC will contact the respective National Olympic Committees in order to organize a dignified Olympic medal ceremony. So you realize you cheat these competitors who live this world of discipline and sacrifice. You cheat them out of their moment on the receiving stand, right, where they're going to get their gold medal. You cheat them out of that. It's still uncertain how Valieva's disqualification is going to affect the silver and bronze medals. Japan finished third. It's likely to move to second. And depending on how a scoring rule is interpreted, Russia could still finish third ahead of Canada, even after deducting Valieva's points from the two events that she skated in during the team event. But this has involved, as I say, skaters who've made supreme sacrifices, and finally, the anti-doping rules come down on the Russians, and they are stripped of the medals. The U.S. receives them.
And they should be embarrassed.
Yeah, sadly, I don't know how many of you saw, was it Icarus? Is that the documentary, Tony? I think it was called Icarus.
Google it.
It was about the doping in the Olympics and how sophisticated the Russians were. God, it's just unreal. I mean, you talk about a caper, it's incredible what the Russians did to dope. And that's, by the way, an Academy Award-winning documentary. You ought to see it. It's very, very good. So, Tony, you can...
Thanks, Tony.
I don't know why I'm turning to you, Tony. Like, we usually always find this stuff. We mention it, and all of a sudden, Tony's... But I believe it's called Icarus. Anyway.
When you say...
there it is. Yeah, Icarus.
When you say sophisticated, you mean like they found new drugs that aren't detected type of thing?
I mean that there are so many complexities that they addressed. You have to be able to somehow penetrate this is all done from memory now, so you really should, you should look at the movie.
Google it.
But you have to be able to penetrate a system that's pretty sophisticated, right? You get these athletes to There it is, how Icarus accidentally exposed a major Ocean's 11 style doping scheme. That's how significant it is. They literally drilled through certain walls to be able to get different bottles into where the urine is and the blood samples are. I mean, it was incredible. It's not
Crazy.
it's not just all the dope. It's being able to swap out and otherwise penetrate these previously impenetrable bottles and samples. It's incredible. Check it out, Icarus. But at least in this instant, and the instance of the last skating Olympic showing, that wrong has been righted. Bayer is ordered to pay $2.25 billion after the jury concludes that Roundup weed killer caused a man's cancer. Remember, Bayer owns Roundup in a huge acquisition of a bunch of other companies as well. The verdict is condemnation of 50 years of misconduct, said the attorney for the defendant, for the plaintiff. The World Health Organization has said an ingredient in Roundup might cause cancer. Bayer, of course, says its products are not carcinogenic. They have lost this case before.
In Richmond, here in the Bay Area. Yeah.
Exactly. Bayer previously paid $10 billion in settlements to thousands of cancer patients. This stuff causes cancer. And this guy, John McKivison, who's diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, he's 49. He sued the company, saying that he developed the cancer after using Roundup on his property for 2 decades. And the jury saying they agree. Roundup is responsible. $2 billion in punitive damages in this Philadelphia court. It's a cancer-causing product. Monsanto was negligent. Monsanto failed to warn about the dangers of the weed killer. This from his attorney. The jury's unanimous verdict was a condemnation of 50 years of misconduct by Monsanto and a declaration that its misconduct was in reckless disregard of human safety and a substantial cause of John McKibben's cancer.
I was looking at this story last night and just seeing, is Roundup still being sold?
Yes.
And I looked up on the Target app, and you can buy it right now, today, on store shelves. This cancer-causing agent that seeps into our ground and gets into our groundwater and everything else is for sale on shelves across America.
The WHO has said that this stuff in Monsanto's Roundup, it's called glyphosate, is probably carcinogenic to humans, and still it is there. And it was a huge controversy in the last administration. The Trump administration wanted to keep it on shelves. While there was, within their own administration, there was a move to remove it from shelves, from the EPA. I think there were several government agencies involved in this, but anyway, it's still out there. It's a great victory for this guy, but it is a crime that stuff continues to be sold with that ingredient, which is clearly cancer-causing. So, meantime, in Law and Disorder, this is straight up good old crime. A Livermore IT director, Livermore is in the East Bay of the Bay Area, stole more than 140 Apple laptops from his Redwood City employer. He was the senior director of information technology, IT as they call it, at a tech company, and part of his job was buying Apple laptops for employees. But according to federal prosecutors, he sold at least 141 of the computers for cash.
Why not?
Cost the company more than $500,000.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
It apparently did work for a while. His federal indictment alleges that he started stealing and selling MacBooks in 2019 and kept up the scheme until last May. The company that employed him is not named in this indictment, but he's been busy selling stuff that didn't belong to him, but that he did order. Meantime, a priceless 18th century painting is returned after a theft by New Jersey mobsters.
Oh, now we're
Yeah.
talking.
It's a
Joe
wild
Box.
idea.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
It's
Little
a
Anthony,
a priceless. Yeah, where am I? Where am I?
Joe Fish, Sal
Yeah.
the Shoemaker,
So Joe Fish.
Box,
There you go.
and Little Anthony.
Yeah, this feels like a Joe Fish job. The School Mistress is the name of the painting. Tony has it up there now. If you're just listening, it's a beautiful classic painting from the 18th century. It's a painting by notable artist. Is it John Opie? 1784 was the estimated date on it. It was taken from the home of Francis Wood, who's 96 years old, stolen in Newark, New Jersey, when Francis Wood was 96, back in 1969. This is an English painting, and it was stolen by New Jersey mobsters more than 50 years ago. That's when the quality mobster work was being done 50 years ago, everybody.
Joe Box and Little Anthony.
Yeah. Earlier this month, there was a ruling that the painting was Wood's rightful property. This is an investigation by the FBI in Salt Lake City. Also, detectives from the Metropolitan Police Department in London, because remember, it comes from Britain. And it was an honor playing a role in recovering a significant piece of art and culture and reuniting a family with its stolen heritage, said FBI Special Agent Gary France. In a world where criminal investigations often leave scars, it was a rare joy to be a part of a win-win case, a triumph for history, justice, and the Wood family.
Good day, sir.
Yeah.
Thomas
So oil-
says they just don't mob like they used to. No.
There's no quality mobbing going
No.
on. You're right about that. Apparently, Opie, one of the most important artists of the period, went on to paint historical scenes, was commissioned to paint portraits of the royal family. One of his paintings was sold at auction for over $500,000. So this is not nobody.
Yeah.
And congratulations on getting that taken care of. I believe with that, hang on a second, because I thought I had one other story. No, I have disorder more than law.
I have one to throw down.
All right.
Alina Habba, the attorney for Donald Trump in the
Yes.
E. Jean Carroll case and others. Apparently, according to Newsweek, she may have made up a fake person to push her arguments in the former president's defamation case.
No.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
Wow.
In a letter today to the judge presiding over the defamation trial, Carroll's attorney, Roberta Kaplan, raised her concerns that Habba used a fake person to promote her accusations that she and the judge had a conflict of interest.
Wow.
Yikes.
There's never been anything like this.
Yeah.
The letter denied the accusations, and Carroll's lead counsel said what she was most concerned about was where Habba received the information of alleged conflict of interest, suggesting that Trump attorney made up a fake source.
Wow. So off-brand for them to just make something up like that. But I
Yeah,
guess
pull
they
it directly out of their rear end, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. Well, to finish Law and Disorder, and that's certainly well within the law, and there's plenty of disorder there. Republicans are now saying it might be okay to ignore the Supreme Court.
What? What?
Yeah. A consequential development of the Trump era is what increasingly looks like the Republicans are serving up in terms of the rule of law. They don't like it anymore. This is a party that once prided itself in law and order, and being the defenders of law and order, they have now moved into the weaponization of the justice system. We hear a lot about that.
Does that
And
mean
Donald-
we can just pretend that Roe v. Wade was never overturned?
No, that's an interesting way to.
Yeah.
I have a story about that in a second. I'll give it to you. Some members of the party in recent days have crossed a new threshold by suggesting it's okay to disregard the Supreme Court. After the Supreme Court ruled last week that federal authorities can remove razor wire that Texas put on the U.S.-Mexico border, Representative Chip Roy, he's the congressperson from Texas, Republican, posted on X that Texas should ignore it. Quote, it's like if someone's breaking into your house and the court says, oh, sorry, you can't defend yourself. What do you tell the court? You tell the court to go to hell. You defend yourself and then figure it out later. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt had gone on CNN, indicated that he would be okay with the idea of disregarding the Supreme Court in certain circumstances. We all agree that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, he said. And if the Supreme Court gets something wrong, for example, if they try to ban and say that we didn't have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, I think the Constitution supersedes somebody in Washington, D.C. telling us, you know. So you pick and choose. It's, cafeteria Constitution.
So much for the law of the land.
Yeah. The question was whether elected officials should just ignore rulings from the U.S. Supreme Court. And apparently there is increasing feeling in certain quarters. Greg Abbott in Texas, one of the spots, and those other Congress people associated with Texas, but beyond. You see it in the Texas Attorney General, who's under his own investigations. I mean, they have to give the feds access to that border, but they are saying now, well, not necessarily. We don't know that we're going to abide by that Supreme Court. Now, right now, they're not in violation of the Supreme Court judgment, but they could be. So it's a very interesting line that they're walking. And the last thing I was going to mention to you, because you mentioned women's reproductive rights, Kim, there is an attempt to block voting. You know, increasingly what's happening is states are putting it on the ballot, right? They're trying to enshrine, essentially, women's reproductive rights in ballot issues. Or they're trying to eliminate women's reproductive rights through the ballot and by putting it on the ballot. Now, there are attempts to block the voting on this issue. That is to say, not allow it to show up on the ballot. Efforts in Missouri and Mississippi attempting to prevent voters from having a say over abortion rights, building on strategies seen in other states, including Ohio. Democrats and abortion rights advocates say that efforts are evidence that Republican lawmakers and abortion opponents are trying to undercut democratic processes meant to give voters a direct role, informing state laws and rules. They're scared of the people and their voters. Since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right, voters in 7 states have either protected abortion rights or defeated attempts to curtail them in statewide votes. Democrats have pledged to make the issue a central campaign topic this year for races up and down the ballot. And, you know, I've said on this show, since the very start of this issue, since Roe was overturned, that you do need to put it on the ballot in as many states as possible, because that is the power of so many women and defenders of women's rights over their own bodies. That is the power of putting that on the ballot to turn out voters. Obviously, if you're GOP, you don't want to remind women of what's happened under your activist court. And so you don't want it on the ballot. And so there are attempts now to block legislation like this and referendums like this from even existing on the ballot nationwide. So that's to be continued. But that is a massive development, I think, because as I say, I think one of the big ways to turn out the women's vote, when I say women, I don't mean just it's gender specific. I mean everyone who is a defender of the freedoms over their own reproductive rights and privacy. One of the big ways to turn it out is to have it on the ballot. You say it is a states' rights issue, but we know that you're just BSing us. We know you'd really just want to take away women's reproductive rights. Yeah. Anyway, that is the latest effort there, and that is Law and Disorder.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped. And please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.